Alright, so in this chapter, the urinary system, we will learn about how the kidneys function and how they produce urine. In this first part, we're going to look at the anatomy of the kidneys and also the nephrons within them. Alright, so this is just talking about the overview of the urinary system, what it does, and so the different organs that we're going to learn about, the kidneys, the ureters, urinary. Here's just the location of the kidneys. It's kind of interesting. The left kidney, remember it's the opposite of you, it's a little bit higher than the right kidney. So on top of the kidneys, we learned that we have the adrenal glands. And you can see here the renal veins and the renal arteries attaching to the kidneys. And the ureters are then going down to the bladder. Kidneys are retroperitoneal. Do you know this term here? It just means that they are behind the peritoneum. If you remember, the peritoneum is the membrane that surrounds these organs in the abdominal cavity, but the kidneys are not inside of that. All right, so in lab, we're gonna go through the different parts of the kidneys. And this is also showing how inside the kidneys we have these many tubular structures called the nephrons. Nephrons are the structural functional units inside the kidneys. And so just some more pictures here showing the anatomy. We're seeing the renal arteries bringing the blood into the kidneys, and then the renal veins take the blood out away from the kidneys. And so really the kidney's job is to filter the blood that comes in, take out the bad stuff that's inside the blood. So those are the different metabolic ways, or also it could be extra nutrients that you don't need in your body. Okay, so that stuff turns into the urine, but whatever the kidneys want to send back to the body then goes through the renal veins, and those then connect to the inferior vena cava and then back to the body. Okay, so again, the kidney's job is to filter the blood. So the renal artery is the one that brings the blood into the kidneys. So then we're going to see that the renal artery is going to branch off inside. It first branches off into the interlobar arteries, which branch off into the arcuate artery. Cortical radiate ones are going more into the cortex part of the kidney. Then the efferent arterioles are the ones that actually go into the nephron. So then the nephrons are going to be doing the filtering and producing the urine. Then after the nephrons, the blood then returns to the renal vein. Okay, so now let's look at the picture and try to identify these. And so this is just kind of listing the different arteries. And now we're seeing a better picture here, a good picture here. And so here it shows renal artery brings the blood in to the kidneys. The renal arteries are going to separate first into the segmental arteries. Segmental arteries then separate into the interlobar arteries. The interlobar arteries are the ones that go in between the pyramid shapes, or those triangular shapes. Arcuate arteries make these kind of branches going on top of the pyramids. Then the interlobular or the cortical radiate arteries are more going towards the outer part of the kidney. But so it's the interlobular arteries that will then branch off into the efferent arterioles, which then attach to the nephrons. Okay. And so we're seeing the different blood vessels inside the kidneys. So here this is showing the pyramid, that's the triangular region found in the renal medulla. And the nephrons are located in part of the cortex region, but they also extend down to the medulla. And so here we're seeing the different blood vessels entering the nephrons. Within each nephron, so then when the blood goes into it, we can see the efferent arteriole bringing the blood into the nephrons. And so you can see how the nephrons are just really a bunch of tubes that are surrounded by these blood vessels. The efferent arteriole brings the blood in. Inside the nephron, this region is called the glomerulus. That you can see these little reddish tubular structures there. But so those are really just blood vessels. So then here, this is where the blood gets filtered. Then the filtered part is now going inside the nephron. Over here. What could not get filtered? because not all of the liquid, the fluid, exits the glomerulus to go into the tubes. What couldn't get filtered is then going through the efferent arteriole. Okay, so let's say that some of the metabolic waste uh, were not able to go into the nephron, and so those are then circulating in the efferent arterioles, which then turn into the peritubular capillaries. So we're going to say that if you missed anything, if you want to put those back into the tubes, that can happen. And so we're going to learn that that's secretion. But if you want to send any nutrients into the blood vessels to go back to the body, then that's called reabsorption. We're going to learn. Okay, and at the bottom here it's saying interlobular arteries or the cortical radiate arteries connect to the efferent arterioles, which connect to the glomerulus. What couldn't get filtered, anything that was missed, goes into the efferent arterioles. So that is the filtered blood. And so then those turn into either the peritubular capillaries or the vasa recta. And so both of these just refer to the blood vessels that surround the nephrons. Surrounding nephrons. I'm just going to write here. All right, so again, the functional units of the kidneys are called the nephrons. Nephrons are composed of these two major parts. Renal corpuscle is kind of the beginning part of it. Inside of it is the glomerulus, which is just a cluster of capillaries, tiny little blood vessels. This is where the filtration occurs. And we saw that the efferent arteriole goes into the glomerulus. Whatever couldn't get filtered out then goes out the efferent arteriole. The glomerular or the Bowman's capsule just refers to the outer covering, and so this is the part that's receiving the fluid from the glomerulus after the glomerulus filtered the blood. Renal tubule are those other tubes that are extending from the corpuscle region. And so the different parts of the renal tubule, you're going to learn the glomerular capsule, then connects to the proximal convoluted tubule, which then turns into the nephron loop or the loop of Henle. Loop of Henle has the part that goes downwards and then back up. So they call these different parts descending and then the ascending loop. And then those then connect to the distal convoluted tubule. Then we're going to learn that the distal convoluted tubules connect to the collecting ducts. Okay, so now let's try to identify these. We can see on this picture, this part here, this entire part is called the corpuscle. And so the covering of it is called the glomerular capsule or the Bowman's capsule. And they label it over here. The inside part was called the glomerulus. And then when the glomerulus filters the blood, the liquids then enter into the proximal convoluted tubule. And the picture on the right does a very good job of showing, this is actually a real microscopic picture, and it shows how on the glomerulus are these different cells called the podocytes. Podo means foot, so these actually mean foot cells. And I mean, of course, they have nothing to do with the foot, but they thought that they look like little feet with the toes. These are putting in little filtration slits to allow for the liquids to come out, but not the large substances to come out of the glomerulus. So only the liquids are able to come out. Okay, and so here we're seeing a picture of the nephron. Here the corpuscle is this entire circular part. And we can see here how the efferent arteriole connects to the glomerulus, efferent arteriole comes out. They just did not extend these to go around the nephron. After the glomerulus, the fluid goes into the proximal convoluted tubule that they labeled over here. And so convoluted, meaning it just looks all messy. Then the proximal convoluted tubule connects to the nephron loop or the loop of Henle. The ascending limb goes downward, ascending limb goes up. Then the loop of Henle connects to the distal convoluted tubule. Then they did not extend it here, but then the distal convoluted tubule will then connect to the collecting duct. Collecting duct is a little bit thicker, and to this, many other nephrons are connecting. So I'm just kind of making these little shapes there to show that other nephrons connect to the collecting duct. And now we're seeing just kind of the entire picture of a nephron. Okay, so once again, the glomerulus is on the inside. glomerular capsule is just the covering of it. The fluid comes out, and now the fluid is going inside first the proximal convoluted tubule. The nephron loop or the loop of Henle has those two parts that go down and then up, and the distal convoluted tubule is then the last part that connects to the collecting duct. And so now we're seeing how the capillaries are going around the nephrons. Peritubular capillaries are more going around the convoluted tubules. Vasa recta goes around more the nephron loop or the loop of Henle. The sequence of the structures that we saw already on the picture. So this is just a good kind of a list showing how the urine is forming, and then the urine is then going to come out of the nephrons to go then into the inner parts of the kidneys, and then out the ureters to the bladder, urethra. Okay, one more thing about the anatomy of nephrons. Some nephrons are shorter. These shorter ones are called the cortical nephrons. And so you're seeing it on the picture here. You can see how the cortical nephrons are shorter, but the juxtamedullary nephrons are the longer ones. These extend farther down into the pyramid region.